Hello and welcome to God the Artist podcast. I'm your host, Morgan McCarver, and today I am with a very special guest, Marita Littauer. I hope I said your last name correctly. Yes. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me this evening, I guess.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I know you're an author and an artist, so let's just start with how do you like to be creative and what is the earliest moment that you remember being creative?
Well, that's an interesting question. My mother, when I was probably 6, 7, 8 years old, I don't remember exactly, but I was young, and she took me to an art class. And I mean, I remember making little things out of clay, like a pinch pot or something that we did in school. But she took me to an art class that was outside of school. And in that art class, afterwards, the instructor told her she was wasting her money on art lessons for me.
Oh my
Now,
goodness.
yeah, so
Wow.
I always thought I really was not an artist. Although when I went to college, I majored in interior design.
Oh, good
And
for you.
I did not actually graduate because I didn't like any of the classes that were not related to interior design. So I took 100% of the interior design classes, but I took zero of the business, math, world history, any of that kind of class. So I actually did not graduate, but I did complete all of the interior design classes and I loved it. And so I always had an interest in the creative side. At that time when I was graduating from, not graduating because I didn't graduate, when I was attending college and perhaps could have graduated, that would have put me in my late teens. I had no idea that I was going to write a book. Writing was really never my thing, but my mother was a writer and she's written 40 books and they're all
Wow.
Christian books. And she's written, obviously 40 books. So when my mother and a friend of hers, Emily Barnes, they're both now deceased, but Emily Barnes wrote even more books than my mother, probably 60 books. And her books were all on time management and household organization and that type of thing. But before either my mother or Emily had ever written a book, the two of them got together one day and said concluded that they needed to do something really to bring in money to their households. It was in a bad economic time. I was probably 19. I'm 67 now, so let's say I was 20. So that would have been roughly 50 years ago. And it was, like I said, a tough economic time. And so the two of them decided that they were going to run seminars for women. And this stuff wasn't done back then. It just wasn't done. Now it seems like, oh, yawn. But then it was new. And they decided to call this seminar for women Feminar.
Oh,
And
wow.
at the time, we all thought that was a very clever thing. And again, I'm a late teen at this point. And the two of them in their little seminar, they were promoting a woman in our community in Southern California at the time. I'm in Texas now, but then was Southern California. And they were promoting a particular woman who did what was called color analysis. Now, you may or may not be familiar with that, but 50 years ago, it was all the rage, and everybody was having their colors done. Now, where I live, it's kind of coming back, and I kind of have to laugh when I see these pictures on Facebook of people where they put a scarf or a sheet of fabric around you, and which color is better on her. So my mother and Emily had a woman that they kind of promoted, and they promoted it as a vehicle for wardrobe organization, for efficiency, that your clothes would all coordinate and mix and match if they were all your color. And this woman that my mother and Emily Barnes were promoting, after a while, she got so busy that the women my mom and Emily sent to her came back and said, we didn't really like her. We don't feel like she spent quality time with us. We felt like she was just rushing us through and, like next. And so at that time, I've got my education in interior design, which has a lot of color to it.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother and Emily came to me and they said, Marita, you're kind of at a place where you're trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life. You've got a good eye for color. You enjoy traveling with us, which I had done. I'd started traveling with my mother when she was speaking when I was just 13 years old. And so they said, why don't you learn how to do this color analysis thing, and we'll send our customers to you. And so I did that. I went and there wasn't official training for color analysis back then, but I went to Beverly Hills numerous times. I don't remember how many sessions I went for, but I went to, I'll draw on a blank because I haven't told this story in so long, to John Robert Powers Modeling Institute. And they gave me private training on makeup and wardrobe and face shape and all of that kind of stuff. Because I had kind of, the interior design color side, but I didn't have like the female side. So they kind of sent me home with a little certificate, said that I'd taken this course, and then I had to develop kind of my program, which I did. And I actually did that successfully for nearly a decade. And then at that point, it seemed like everybody who wanted to have their colors done had their colors done maybe 2 or 3 times by 2 or 3 different people who told them 2 or 3 different things. So it sort of fell out of fashion. However, there was a book that came out around that time that was called Color Me Beautiful. You can look it up on Amazon. It's still there. I checked recently. And it became very popular. And the gal that wrote it, she created a line of makeup and Color Me Beautiful, and it was just the thing at the time. Hard to imagine now, probably, but at the time it was the thing. And I can picture now, because I have been in the publishing business for a long time, most of my adult life now, I can picture my mother's publisher, which at the time was Harvest House Publishers, a Christian publisher, and I can picture them having an editorial meeting. And I can picture them all sitting around a boardroom table and them having a conversation about, well, who has any ideas of what we should publish? And I can picture that someone probably said, well, this book, Color Me Beautiful, is really popular. We should get a book like this from a Christian author. And I can picture that someone said, well, Florence's daughter, Marita, does that. Now, they had no idea whether I could write or whether I, or not. But they knew Florence would not allow Marita to turn in a bad book. So they sent me a letter. I mean, this is really unheard of. But out of the clear blue sky, to me, they sent me a letter saying, we are interested in a book on color analysis. We understand this is what you do. Would you write us this book? And I was like, sure, why not? And I did write it, all longhand. Whole thing was, and my mother wrote all her books longhand. My mother, she died at 92 6 years ago, but she never did become computer proficient at all. And she wrote every one of her books longhand and paid someone to type them up. But I wrote the book, and my mother essentially rewrote the book. I mean, she went through it with a fine-tooth comb and made sure the writing was good. And that was my first book. So I never, in fact, I'll show you here. This is it here. This is my first book, Shades of Beauty. And you can still find it on Amazon. And of course, it's long ago out of print. But I never set out to be a writer, but that's how I became one. And, lo and behold, I got good at it. And I haven't written a book since my book Wired That Way was published. Well, I did write one self-published book, but that's kind of a side note. Wired That Way was published in 2006, so we are now in the 20th anniversary of Wired That Way, and my publisher's going to be doing not a whole new edition. Basically, the inside won't change, but the back picture, which is 20 years old, will change. I've got a new picture for that, and the back cover copy will be a little bit different, but they are putting out a new kind of edition of the book for the 20th anniversary. But I haven't written a book really since then. But I still write. I have a blog that I write for, and other people write for. So if you run into people who are looking for ways to get their writing kind of published, I'm always looking for new contributors to my blog, although it is a demographic specific blog. It's for women 60 plus who want to be living their best life. So that's the emphasis of my blog. But I also write for a local magazine. So I still write and I enjoy writing, and it's something at this point in my life that's relatively easy for me. But I really never set out to write. But I've always been on the creative side. I love cooking. I love hospitality and entertaining. In fact, my second book was a cookbook, which is also still available on Amazon. I mean, there are all these older books of mine. They're available used on Amazon, but you can find them if you're looking for them. So I have, now written 20 books. And at this point, even though I haven't written a book basically in 20 years, I do continue to write. That was probably a much longer answer than you wanted.
No, that was great.
I
Wow.
haven't told that story in so long. It was kind of fun to tell.
Yeah, it's fun to listen to. And it sounds like you have interest and experience in many different things to be able to write a cookbook and a book on like color theory, essentially.
Yes.
What do you have like a specific niche where you say, well, I am this type of writer, or are you just open to pretty much anything you want to write about?
Well, I definitely don't write fiction. I
Hmm.
don't have a clue how to write fiction. I read a lot of fiction. I read about a novel a week. I love reading fiction. And I have taught at writers' conferences, Christian writers' conferences. I used to run one of the largest Christian writers' conferences in the country. And I would go to classes on writing fiction that friends of mine would teach. And I just totally do not get the whole fiction thing. So I definitely do not write that. And I certainly don't do like technical writing. But most of what I write now for the magazine, a local magazine that I write for, are more like profiles where I interview somebody. And what I normally do is I interview them, spend roughly an hour interviewing, and I go to bed that night. And in the morning, I wake up with like the whole idea in my head, and I go sit and pound it out. It takes me about an hour to write it, so I have about 2 hours invested in that article. But so those are easy for me to write at this point in my life. And then the blog posts, they're usually max 1,200 words, and so at this point I'm writing shorter pieces.
Awesome.
And I
How
love
would
the blog. I love the blog idea because I can write it today and it can be published tonight.
Right, right. It's amazing how far technology has come in that way that you don't have to get approval or anything to be able
Yeah.
to speak your mind. Isn't that cool? Um, so how would you say, you mentioned you're a Christian and most of your content is Christian. How would you say that has been received over the years? Have you noticed any kind of change?
It's interesting because my book, Wired That Way, was published by a previous publisher, and that publisher got sold to the current publisher. And the previous publisher's name was Gospel Light. And so the name Gospel Light was on the back of the book, and it was on the personality profile that we have available in a paper version and in an online version. And I had someone who used to buy a good bit of the personality profiles from a business, and they used it in their corporate training. And at one point, they reached out to me and said, "Can we have this without Gospel Light on the back of it?" And they said, we can't use it. We're being told, and the person that I was dealing with had no problem with it at all. She'd been using it for years. But the higher up said, no can do. And my book, most of my stuff, I'm not a Bible teacher, although I did write a Bible study with my mother. But I'm not a Bible teacher. I'm more of a personal growth genre. But everything I say has biblical alignment, I would say. It's not, like I said, it's not necessarily a Bible study, but it's what I like to call Christian light. And I tell people, if you're not offended that our money says "in God we trust," then you won't be offended with my work. But if, it does have some biblical reference, it does. I do write especially in not my profiles I write for the magazine, but for my blog and for my book, I do write from a Christian foundation. and kind of an assumption that you accept, that Jesus Christ is the Savior, and, so forth. And, I do write from a perspective that my reader accepts the general premises. And in my personality book, there's one chapter, it's the very last chapter, on spiritual personality, where we talk about the personality of Jesus, and we talk about how your personality impacts your prayer life, your Bible study life, your view of God, and so forth. And that is the last chapter in the book on purpose, so that if someone who's reading it more in a business setting, if they don't want to read that chapter, they don't have to. So that's kind of what I mean by it's Christian light. But it definitely has a foundation of Jesus and God and the Bible.
That's awesome. And we're talking about the book Wired That Way, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
That the personality tests fascinate me, and that you're combining that with the spiritual elements. That's I really want to read that for sure. That's a really great idea. How did
chapter, and if you really like it, I have a whole nother book on just that, called Your Spiritual Personality. But
Oh, cool.
the general content is in the 10th chapter in here. In fact, when we talk about the personalities, I use a particular Bible verse as kind of the foundation for why this general concept, the technique, or the philosophy of the personalities, as we call it. I say we, meaning my mother and myself, even though she's deceased now, but she and I taught it together for years and years. And I use the Bible verse Romans 12:18. And I love how that verse breaks down. And it basically has no religion in the verse. So when I'm speaking to a business setting, they know where I'm coming from. But I mentioned this verse, and I've never had anyone be offended when I've been speaking somewhere at this verse. And the verse is Romans 12:18. It says, if possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. And when I'm speaking on it, I say, I love how that verse breaks into those three parts. The first part is, if possible. So it's like God is giving us a disclaimer. It's like he's saying, I know you can't do this, but you should try. This is something you should aim for. So the first part of the verse says, if possible. The second part says, so far as it depends on you. And so I asked my audience, what does that mean? Whose responsibility is it? Well, it's my responsibility. It's not my responsibility to try to change you. It's my responsibility to do what I can to, the third part of the verse is, be at peace with all men. And I always say, if God just said, be at peace with all men, that's not something we can do, because we can only control our side. And all of us know there are people out there that, we've had in our lives at some point, and they just plain don't want to be gotten along with. And so no matter how hard we try, there are those people that we are not going to be at peace with, no matter how hard we try. But the concepts of the personalities are a tool that allow us to fulfill that biblical mandate. If possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men.
Mm-hmm. Peace. That's so important, especially today. It's still very, very relevant.
Yes.
What would you say the four different personalities are?
Well, we use the basic, we call them four basic personalities, and the titles, the original titles of the personalities, are more than 2,000 years old. They come from the great Greek philosopher Hippocrates, who's also referred to as the father of modern medicine. And he, back then, with the limited medical and scientific knowledge that was available at the time, he observed that people were different. Now, when I speak on this topic, I start out by raising my hand and saying to my audience, how many of you have noticed there are people out there who are different from you? And of course, everybody raises their hand. And then I ask, how many of you live with, work with, or used to live with that person? They all raise their hand. And then I say, how many of you have tried to change that person? And again, they all raise their hand. And then I say, how often has it worked? And by now they're all with me and they shout back, never. And so, like we have noticed there are people out there who are different from us. Hippocrates noticed that. And with the limited scientific and medical knowledge available at that time, he perceived that what made people different was that they had different fluids in their bodies. So the terms I'm about to tell you are the original Greek terms that Hippocrates created back then. And if you have any medical knowledge, you would identify that these terms represent fluids in the body. Now, because those words, when I'm speaking on it, I say, they may sound like Greek to you. Well, that's because they are. They are Greek words. But because they don't mean anything to most people, I have added to it a modern day adjective. And then I also reference a color. So I tell people, I don't care if you use the Greek word, the modern word, or the color, because this is not about labels. It's about relationships. So whatever label works best for you, that's fine. Use that. So with that background, the answer to your question is, I like to start with what is represented by the color yellow, which I call the popular sanguine. And that's about what I am 50% of. And the yellow is kind of like the smiley face. We're the person who, as a child, you might say, oh, she never met a stranger. And we're the talkative person, the outgoing person, the loud person. Almost all of us who are the popular sanguines, most of our life we have been shushed because we talk too much. And my ex-husband used to kick me under the table and do like this with me. He'd do his hand like turn down the volume. He was always shushing me. Part of why he's my ex-husband. But so that's the popular sanguine personality. Now they're arranged. When I teach it, I like to have them arranged in what I call the squares. So for those of you who are not viewing what I'm holding in my hand, you can just picture an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper divided into four, two squares on the top and two squares on the bottom. So if you're imagining that in your mind, you'd put the popular sanguine on the top left, and that's the yellow. On the bottom right, you would put the perfect melancholy, and that's the blue. Now, where the popular sanguine is the loud, outgoing person, the opposite is the perfect melancholy. They're the more quiet, withdrawn, introverted kind of person. Popular sanguine is energized by people. Perfect melancholy is energized by solitude. And so I like to show those as opposite. And those are the two most obvious to identify, which is why I start with those first. The perfect melancholy tends toward perfection, not just in themselves, but in their life, in their day. They expect things to go perfectly. And if they don't go perfectly, they get very frustrated. And they expect perfection in others. And they're usually married to someone who is opposite from them, the popular sanguine. And we're kind of more happy-go-lucky, and we're certainly not perfect. And so there can be some really obvious conflicts there. Then we have the red, which is the powerful, choleric personality. And that's the natural boss of life, the strong, driven, goal-oriented kind of person. They can tend to be rude. They're the ones that would kind of put their hands on their hips and say, well, with me, you always know where you stand. Now, when they've told you where you stand, they may have emotionally terribly wounded you, but they go right on. They don't even notice that. And they also, another thing interesting about the powerful choleric is they view sickness as a weakness. And if they are sick, they won't acknowledge it. You know, they may have a cold and someone will say, do you have a cold? No, it's just allergies. I'm fine, really. They don't want to admit that they might be sick because that's a weakness. Then the last one, represented by the color green, is the peaceful phlegmatic. And I list them last not because they're least important, but because their body language, their mannerism, they're not so obvious to identify because they're the balanced, steady, even individual. That's the person who prefers to be in the background. They're the ones, if you say, would you like coffee or tea? He or she will say, oh, I don't care. It doesn't matter, whichever is easiest. And truly, they don't care. And so that's a really quick overview of the four different personalities: yellow, popular sanguine; blue, perfect melancholy; red, powerful choleric; and green, peaceful phlegmatic.
That is amazing. What about someone like me who says, well, I think I'm a little bit of red and a little bit of blue, and how does it play in when you don't exactly know what you are?
Well, that's why we have a personality profile, for one thing. But the
Mm.
other thing is, we're all unique. None of us are really, or there might be someone, but rarely have I ever found someone who's exactly in one box. And it's not really, I don't like to think of it as putting someone in a box, because I've got here in my hand a color wheel. For those who can't see it, I have a color wheel. And, right now I'm showing like the red, and then we veer over and there's the yellow, but in between there's orange. So, when we think about these four personalities and the colors, I'm personally roughly 50-50, the top two. And I place them on the top, and they're hot colors, you might have noticed. So
Mm.
the yellow and the red, and they're the outgoing, strong kind of personality. They're the extroverts. The bottom two are the cool colors, and they're more the introverts. But when you have someone like me who's about 50-50, those top two, you have someone who can be kind of overwhelming, because both parts of me are, and my husband is the bottom two. And he could be content sitting in his chair all day long. And in fact, he said to me, if it wasn't for you, I'd probably never leave the house. And that's probably true. He's content to, and I'm like always looking for, what can I go and do? And so they're different in that way. But no one is, or virtually no one is 100%. And talking about combinations, and I know we're running out of time, the top two are a real logical combination, because they're both outgoing and extroverted. Then the blue and the red, as you mentioned, that's real logical together, because both of them are very task focused. And I like to refer to this person, the powerful choleric and the perfect melancholy in one, as corporate America's favorite person, because they're the real worker bees of life. And then this combination over here, the peaceful phlegmatic and the popular sanguine, I like to reference them as everybody's favorite person, because they have the easygoing nature of the peaceful phlegmatic, but the fun of the popular sanguine. So while they may not get as much done at work because they stand around and talk to people too much, people love them. And so they often get promoted in a corporate setting. I'm talking about the popular sanguine perfect melancholy blend will often get promoted ahead of this person, who may be better qualified, because this person, especially the powerful choleric, on the way up the corporate ladder, they've stepped on a few people, they've offended people, and when it comes time to they're sitting, they're in HR discussing, who should we give this job to, and we go, should this one or this one? Well, the powerful choleric perfect melancholy combination has some enemies. I mean, I had some employees once who said to me, no, if you hire her, I will not work for her. And, but where this combination, everybody loves them. So they may be less qualified, but they often get promoted ahead of other people. So that probably wasn't really what you were asking me. But that's also, your question was, what about if I think I'm a blend? That's where the personality profile comes in helpfully. And we have, about 6 years ago, I made that available electronically. We do have it, of course, it's in the book. And we have the paper copy of it that we sell. Amazon sells it as well. And if you just want one copy, I'd rather you go to Amazon, because they'll get it to you more quickly than I will. But if you want 100 copies, you should buy them from me, because I'll sell them to you cheaper. But I have a lot of churches and a lot of medical offices, and they order hundreds of these from me at a time. But the electronic one is available online.
I'm sure that, yeah, businesses would love this kind of thing because it helps you understand who you are. And then through that, you can understand how to get along with other people, like you were saying.
Yes.
That's huge. Have you noticed, does this play into your artistic ability at all? You mentioned you're a painter. Do you find that you feel one personality more when you're painting and a different personality when you're, say, speaking or writing?
Well, not so much that, but I think it plays out in the type of art. For
Mm.
example, for me, what I like to do, and I mentioned I have a background in interior design, and I like to do paintings that are what I call decor specific, and I like to do large scale. So, what my dream client or for a painting is someone comes to me and I go to their house and I look at their living room, for example, it could be any room, but and they need something for over their fireplace. That's what I love to do. But I don't do I tell people if you want a picture of your kid on a horse, I'm not your person. I don't do fine art. I took a class and I did one painting in my whole life in oil. And after that class, I'm like, oh, this is so not for me. I do not have the patience to work with oil. I like acrylic. I can do it fast, and I do large, big color kind of things. And that's what I like to do. But a perfect melancholy artist, that would make them nuts because they need more structure and they want it to be more refined. And so it definitely plays out in that way.
I had never considered that, but that makes so much sense. And thinking about my friends who are artists and me being an artist, that exactly is what you're saying. Like the more uh, quiet, introverted, but particular, very focused, task driven, like you said, people. There's a task that they have to accomplish. There's usually like an artist statement, or some kind of there's some kind of goal, a show or something. But then
Mm-hmm.
the more outgoing or the more laid back. You're right. Their art speaks to that, but in a beautiful way as well. It's not like
Yeah,
one's better than the other,
just different.
just different. Yep. That's amazing. Um, let's see what other questions I want to ask you. There's too many to choose from, is the hard part because you're so fascinating. Um,
Oh,
is
you're
there a project
run
that,
out of time for what you told me. You didn't want to go over the time. While we're talking about my art, though, let me just mention if
yeah.
anyone wants to see my art, it's on my. I have a Facebook page for my art, and
Oh, cool.
I call my. You'll love this. I call my art business Happy Spirit Art. All my paintings should make you smile, and if that's my goal is I want my work to make you smile.
I love that. That's perfect. Is
But it's
there a
on
project?
Facebook. Marita's Happy Spirit Art.
Marita's Happy Spirit Art. I'll link to the Facebook page in the show notes as well. Is there a project that you've wanted to work on that you haven't been able to, either writing or painting? You just haven't gotten to it yet?
Well, actually, I've redone my whole living room in the last
Whoa.
6 months, and now I'm ready to work on my bedroom. I'm not going to do
Mm.
quite the refresh on the bedroom that I did on the living room, but I'm getting new rugs and new bedspread. So that's a project, and it's creative.
Hmm.
It's art of sorts, and my husband and I've sent him links to rugs, and we've agreed on one. I just need to like sell a few more books so I can buy the rugs I want. But yeah, and I always have kind of a list of in my head. It's not a real list because I'm not a real list person, but I have a list of paintings I want to do. But I'm not motivated to do a painting. I'm not the kind of artist that needs to paint because my spirit calls me to. I'm
Mm.
not motivated to paint unless I have a customer who wants something.
Mm.
Like I
Yeah,
need a
that's
deadline. I'm the in everything in life. I'm the kind of person. I had a little luncheon today, and I was really busy over the weekend, and so I kind of had to plan out when am I going to get this luncheon cooked. And so I made the soup on Saturday, and I made the chicken salad on Sunday, and so Monday I served my meal. But I I had to think through how am I going to manage to get all of this done, and I need a deadline. So if I don't have a deadline for things, I tend to put it off and put it off and put it off.
mm.
So I like to
Yeah.
paint when I have a customer who actually wants something.
Oh, nice.
My most
So,
recent painting I did was 24 by 48 inch West Texas sunset. It's on my Facebook page. And I was asked to do it for a charity silent auction.
Hmm.
And they specifically asked for a West Texas sunset. So that was a fun challenge.
I bet. Wow. And that's a huge space to be painting on as well. You have a lot of movement in there, I'm
Well,
sure.
I do like I said, I like big.
You like the big. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, you're right. We are coming to a close, but I do want you to have the last word. Is there any kind of inspiration you want to share with the listeners or any kind of call you want to give to them?
Well, you've brought it up so beautifully, Morgan, that the idea that when we understand other people, the people that we live and work with, and as I mentioned, we tend to naturally be attracted, especially marriage wise, to people who are opposite from us. And I believe God designed it that way so that I like to say, like where I'm strong, I'm weak. I'm strong, I'm weak. My husband's strong, weak. For those of you who can't see, I'm holding up my fingers and then I interlock my fingers like that. And I feel that when my husband and I have opposite strengths and opposite weaknesses, we bring a full complement of skills to the table. And I believe that that's how God designed it. However, if you don't understand this and you come together and you're opposite, it is, those things that were attract become attack. And I really don't know how any marriage lasts that doesn't understand these concepts. And the concepts of the personalities really do help people fulfill that biblical mandate, if possible. So far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men.
Hmm. Beautiful. And we can find your books on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And is that the best place to go, or do you have a website?
Yeah, I do. Well, I do have a website. If you want the online personality profile or quantity discount, it's simply thepersonalities.com. The word THE and then personalities plural.com. And I have a lot of free resources on there. In fact, this time with you, when I have the link to it, I will add that to the free resources section of thepersonalities.com. And so I've got speeches I've given that are there, speeches from my mother that are there, and a lot of free resources and a blog. It's a different from my other blog. My other blog is bestlifeproject.com. It's best-lifeproject.com. Unfortunately, I had to have a hyphen in there. Best Life without the hyphen will take you somewhere else. But bestlifeproject.com is my 60 plus women Christian blog. And thepersonalities.com is my personality stuff. And Marita's Happy Spirit Art on Facebook is my art stuff.
Great. We'll definitely check that out. I am super fascinated by the personalities book, but your other books interest me as well. The cookbook sounds awesome too.
If you happen to be a Kindle Unlimited member, the book Wired That Way is free.
Sweet. Even better. Get a digital copy as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've really enjoyed talking to you and learning all about the different personalities.
It's getting so fast.
It has gone so fast. And I'm so glad that you're able to continue your mother's legacy in that way. That's
too.
just so precious. Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
beautiful. Well, I'm sure I'll have you on the show again sometime. So until next time,